Learned how to cook. Each week I spend time researching recipes, going grocery shopping for ingredients, and then actually cooking the meals. A couple of the favorite dishes that I made were chicken parm and pretzels. Those both came out really well, so I was happy with that. My original plan had been to come in and discuss cooking as a life skill, the benefits of it, you save money, better diet, that sort of thing. But I decided that that wouldn't really be the best use of this time. It wasn't this sort of like profound new concept. It was just an idea where everyone sort of agreed, yeah, that makes sense, and you just kind of move on. What I want to talk about today is eating disorders, because as I was going through my project, doing my community connection and research, this was a topic that came up a lot. For my research, what I did was I looked at the benefits of meal planning, and that was really valuable, I thought, because you spend a lot of time looking at different people who would use this sort of thing, and the most common way this came up would be if you had a dietary restriction that sort of caused you to spend a lot of time thinking about what you had to eat because it wasn't as simple as it would be for other people. And as far as the community connection portion, where this came from was I job shadowed a dietitian over at SNU, and that was a really great experience. We spent a lot of time working with students to sort of develop diets based on their goals and needs, was really what she did there. So I did some research on eating disorders because this is what we spent a lot of our time on, and the most interesting thing that I found was that over 30 million people suffer from eating disorders in the US, and this number actually is a little low because there are some unreported ones for reasons that we'll get into later on. But really what would happen is, as I was there job shadowing, she worked with a lot of athletes and people who wanted to eat healthier in general, but the biggest block of people she worked with were those with eating disorders. We'd sort of meet with students throughout the day, and before each meeting she would brief me on the students' conditions before we would meet with them, so I would know what was going on. And there were two students in particular that really stood out to me that I want to talk about. But first I want to get into some background info on the conditions that they had. The first student suffered from a condition that was really similar to anorexia, which is when you don't take in enough food to remain healthy. The difference here was that typically that's due to having concerns over body image, which wasn't really the case here, but there's no other diagnosis for that, so it's still considered anorexia. It just doesn't meet the book definition. And the second student was suffering from celiac disease, which is when you can't eat gluten, because if you do, the immune system will attack your small intestine, which is just really not good. But the first student was an athlete. She was a field hockey player. She just woke up one day and just had no urge to eat anymore. She couldn't even look at food. She couldn't do anything, just took in very little food for a number of days. This sort of continued on, and she ultimately just ended up collapsing on the field during practice one day, at which point she went to the hospital, received medical attention, and she got put on some medicine, which helped her out. So she's okay now, just to clarify, but so that was how that started for her. The meeting I saw was more of a check-in to make sure that she was doing better now. She was following her new diet, which she was, so that was really good to see. But I kind of had some lingering questions about why she had continued like this for, I think it was 3 days without talking to anyone or going to try and receive any kind of help for this, even though she recognized that it was a problem. So I did some research on eating disorders, and what I found was that a lot of people will choose not to disclose this because they're either scared, embarrassed, ashamed, confused, or just in denial of their conditions. So I think it's really important that we look at ways to educate ourselves about conditions like this that can become onset later in life, just to sort of make sure that we know what's going on and that it's not sort of this thing you need to be afraid of. It's just something that you have to work on and make sure you're doing what you can to try and get it fixed, as opposed to just ignoring it and being scared of what's happening. The second student, who was the one suffering from celiac disease, his parents had tried to set up a lot of meetings with the dietitian because he needed help, but he was in denial of the condition he was dealing with, and he sort of just refused help. He wouldn't go to the meetings, he wouldn't do anything. So that day that we went there, he didn't even show up to the meeting again, and he had struggled with this problem for a couple of years, and it was really unhealthy for him. So what I wanted to do today was to sort of bring attention to this and point out that there's no stigma surrounding eating disorders. It's a totally normal thing that happens to regular people. There's no reason to be afraid of something like this. It's just kind of a fact of life. I mean, I have a friend who has an eating disorder, and it's really not a huge, I mean, it is a big deal, but it's not something you have to be like afraid or scared of. It just kind of, you find a way to deal with it and you move on and you continue to sort of live your life normally. And I think it's important to take away from this that if you develop something like this and it happens to you, you're not alone. There are a lot of people, it was over 30 million who were in the same boat. And I think more broadly, the takeaway from this was that if you need help, you have to be willing to accept it, because things can get better, but only if you're willing to let them get better. And that's all I have. Unless anyone has any questions. No?